Hey everyone, I'm Tammy Salenberger, the author of The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about who they are, the different parts of themselves, and for those who want to connect with their true self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I am so excited today to talk to David Polidi. So David is a fellow IFS podcaster, and he is a fellow lover of all things IFS. And so we have been talking about what everyone is talking about right now, which is the IFS. This is not unlike the IFS movie. No, it's not the IFS movie. We are so excited to talk about the new movie, Inside Out 2, and all the people in the IFS community that are just so excited about this movie. So David, welcome to the One Inside podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
It is wonderful to be here.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. So I feel like everyone's talking about this movie. And so let's talk about sort of the IFS characteristics of this movie. So back in the first movie, I don't know about you, David, but what happened during the first movie is if I said, okay, what kind of therapy do you do? I would answer, well, have you seen the movie Inside Out? Right. And so we haven't said that. I haven't said that probably for a couple of years now because I sort of, I don't know, it's sort of not relevant or something. But we used to say that all the time, right? Like, oh, do you want me to tell you what kind of therapy I do? Well, have you seen the movie Inside Out? Or even clients would say that, right? Oh, well, you have me talking to my parts just like Riley did on Inside Out. I'm like, yes.
When I started the IFS class, I believe they played the clip of her around the table with her mother and her father. Riley, how was your day today? And all their heads going. And there was this feeling that, aren't they really just emotions? Where now I would totally have a different view of that. But when I was first introduced to the model, I saw it as like, oh yeah, they're just like joy and anger. And that's what kind of resonated with me of what the model was.
Yeah. So what the movie does right is it gives us this idea that parts that are in our brain, which we can talk about this too, but there's sort of this console in our brain with these emotions, right? The 5 main emotions that were in the first movie, and that there's this sort of a committee of different emotions in our brain. And so IFS says, yes, that's true. And they're not just emotions, they're something else. So what would you add, right? So the movie gets it right with, yes, we are multiple, we have these different emotions, but they're not just emotions, they're parts. So what would you add to that idea?
I mean, first off, like kind of looking at it now, and kind of living in the model for a couple of years, I would say that I see them as protectors, so they're definitely, I'd put that on there. And this movie, and we could get into this later, but number 2 actually has some exiles, which I thought was phenomenally brilliant. I think emotions can be parts, right? So I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but I think they could also be so much more. So like, it really depends on when you're with a client, what's showing up for you. And like you said, where is it showing up? It doesn't have to be in the brain. And it could be an emotion, but it also could be something like, so I wanted to ask you this, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping here. Have you seen Pixar's 20-something?
No.
So they showed it in our IFIO class. They showed a clip of it, and it's on Disney Plus. It's brilliant. And it's a girl that's turning 21. She's at a bar with her friend. It's Pixar, so they're that type of animation. And but you learn soon that she's struggling with her 21st birthday, and she runs into the bathroom. She has a trench coat on. She takes off the trench coat, and you see that it's 3 girls that are all kind of standing on each other's shoulders. And one of them has a 1, and she's a 1-year-old little baby. One of them has a 10, so it's her 10-year-old self. And then one of them is 16. And they're all like nervous about her being 21. And it's a phenomenal movie. And so again, it's Pixar. Pixar's doing it right, and they're definitely latching on to this IFS understanding. But in that movie, it was like younger versions of this girl. So I think that there's many, many different ways. And so this is just one way of perhaps seeing our parts, but it's also kind of limiting. It's not just emotions. It could be so much more than that.
Yeah, that's great. So in Inside Out, they're not ages, and even as the mom's parts and dad's parts, and even the friends in this movie, you see the friends have parts too, and they look similar, but they're all the same five emotions, and all the same
So
kind
I
of.
have a theory about that. I got a theory about that. I think, and again, I'm making this up, but my theory is that this is Pixar's way of saying we're seeing things the way that Riley's seeing it. So the same way that Riley's able to have her understanding of her emotions, she's almost projecting it onto everybody else.
Well, I loved just the concept that, so David and I have a lot in common. And one thing that we have in common is we both have only children that happen to be 13 years old, who is the same age as Riley. And so what I loved about it is my son's, Riley's part in her, in her console triggers a part in mom's console, and that's exactly what happens, right? Like we're sitting around the dinner table, and my son's part up in his in his system triggers a part in my system, and triggers a part in my partner's system. And so I loved that, because that's another really base. So we got some basic IFS ideas here. One is that we're multiple, and that our system can have a relationship, right? The emotions / parts have a relationship with each other. So that's one tenet of IFS. Another tenet is that your parts, my kid's part, is going to trigger my part.
So I'll add in that, yes, and maybe a third tenet of the movie with that goes so nicely with IFS is that I don't know about you, I've always love the image of that inner psychic bus where you say that like parts will take over the steering wheel, and it's a nice way of talking about blending. So the console, like you talked about, that really in my mind showed blending. And
Yeah.
spoiler alert here for people listening, but there was that part where anxiety like couldn't let go. Like she was like running around and around and around and around in that anxiety. She wanted to help, and she realized she wasn't at some point, and actually apologized for it. But to me, that was like, man, what a beautiful kind of picture of what it could look like when somebody's blended with their parts.
Yeah. So let's jump in. Let's jump into this about anxiety, and then I want to talk about exiles. So yes, third tenet of IFS is that we get blended with these parts, and so there's this sweet, really intense scene where Riley is at the hockey game, and she basically is having a panic attack. Right? She's in the timeout booth. I clearly don't know hockey. I'm like that timeout chair in a hockey arena. And the poor thing is really struggling. And inside of her, so this is so beautiful, right? Outside of her, we see panic attack, sweating, shaking. She can't see what's happening. And then we see what's happening inside. Beautiful, right? Because something's happening inside. And we see sweet anxiety, this orange little character running in a tornado-like circle around this console when all the other parts are stepped back, completely immobilized, have no idea what to do. And anxiety is blended. Anxiety is driving the bus. Like she is in complete control, completely blended. And this really beautiful moment happens where I think joy comes, and we'll talk about joy in a second, what that is. But joy comes, and then poor anxiety stops, or something happens between joy and anxiety.
I think
David,
Joy says, you gotta let go.
yeah. And then anxiety was she was tearing up. Like anxiety was tearing up. It was so beautiful, because here's this part, and anxiety says, I was just trying to protect her. Oh,
I got chills.
yeah. Yeah. It was so beautiful. Yeah. So beautiful. And that's what our parts do, right? They're working so hard, even when it hurts us and it hurts them. Like you see anxiety working her little butt off because she thinks she's doing the right thing for Riley.
Absolutely. And it really touched me. And I'll take it a little bit, off target here. What really hit me was having a 13-year-old girl and working with kids and knowing how important their friendships are with their peers. And so anxiety was just solely focused on, I need to get these other girls to like me. And, I kind of was laughing with my wife where at the beginning, they showed the what was it, Personality Islands? And it was hysterical because they have the family island, but it had gotten a lot smaller and there's construction going on everywhere. And then you have this
Yeah.
big like friendship island.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's become really important. And I think the new parts, especially anxiety, was just so focused on, I need to really focus on how could I get these girls to like me? How could I, win the game, get on the team and just be accepted by my peers, particularly because her friends were going to a new school. So I think she's very fearful of being just alone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that because that's so, and what we just know about developmentally, that's so appropriate, right? Like your family island gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and your friendship island is big. There's lights, there's moving things. It's super exciting, and so all your value and all your energy is going to go is put into hanging, taking care of this island and building this island. And so you really see Riley as whole system, her whole system, including the balls of memory, which I want to talk about, like all come to, what am I trying to say? Like everything really gets hyper focused on this friend island.
At least I think you're right, particularly through anxiety. I think that all of them have, you definitely, and they have all the creatures that are building the stuff and the construction workers. So her system itself is absolutely gearing towards friendship. And which is really interesting because in my mind, the movie also kind of shows you a little bit or leans towards this whole notion of what am I hardwired for and what are my parts?
Yeah.
And so there's some hardwiring going on with the friendship. There's definitely some, I would think, fear, joy, anger, they're all focused. But then you have anxiety, who I almost want to say is like fixated on it.
Yeah. That's so true, right? Because if anxiety is running the console and or anxiety is blended, she's the one picking what memories we're going to keep and what memories we're going to
That's
put
right.
in
That's right.
the value system where we're getting our value, sort of which memories are we going to exile and kind of throw away, and what memories are we going to make into our value statements or kind of who my self is? Because she's sort of creating this new self, not capital S self, maybe capital S self. We'll talk about that in a second. But so at the beginning, you see Joy. Joy is the one picking what memories are we going to exile, what memories are going to sort of hurt things, sad things. We're going to sort of put those little bubbles and those little balls.
She made a machine, right? She made like this little pinball thing that like she could take the memories she didn't like and bing, just launch them out to the back of the brain so that they didn't have to think about them anymore. And then she'd pick and handpick and choose what memories she was going to create this, I think they call it a sense of self, which you would think Joy would have learned from the first movie that you can't get rid of memories because you know what? Sometimes you think the sad memories or the angry memories are no good, but there's actually beauty to all of the memories. So I don't know, maybe I'll put a pause on that because there might be traumatic memories, which I don't know. I might have to think about that a little bit more, but I don't know, something about me, that notion of like, let's discard the memories that we don't want to keep, particularly because in my mind, it's coming from a part. Something about that doesn't sit right with me.
Well, do you know your Enneagram type, David?
No, I actually wanted to ask you that because Enneagram is one of the things I do not know anything about. And how do I find out what my Enneagram type is?
Well, so I'm going to pause that because that's going to get us in a whole other thing. Because I was thinking, so I'm an Enneagram 3, and so this is the reason why I asked it, because there's a part of me, a large part of me that's like, yeah, let's get rid of. I completely disagree with you, or this part of me does. Like, let's get rid of all the memories that don't work for us, and let's just stay in our happy little bubble so we can get stuff done and we can be busy and we can be happy. And so I just thought, ooh, that's interesting because I mean, me self knows, yes, we need all the memories, blah, blah, blah. But there's another part of me that's like, hey, I'm happy to get rid of I don't need to sit up at night and think about all the things I did wrong today. Let's just get rid of all that stuff. Yeah. So
but it really quickly, if I was going to respond to that, I love what you're saying and it gets me excited. I feel that the part that gets, entwined and holds on and hooked by the memories and the trauma, because that could take me in a whole nother tangent as well with the MDR. Like, I do hear the suffering in that, and that's not good. And yet there's a part of me that's like, if we could have these memories without the suffering, without feeling hooked, without feeling like we have to ruminate them, but just those memories, to me, that's what makes our sense of self. Like,
That's beautiful. Yeah.
that's what helps us kind of know who we are, is through what we've been through.
Yeah, I love that. And so they get there at the end, right? They kind of get there at the end, this beautiful, but it's just I love the idea of there's things that happen to us and beliefs, and then they come up, this beautiful sort of white light comes up to form this sense of self out of these memories and beliefs.
What did you make of that? Like, when I saw the sense of self, I was like, I don't know what to, because it wasn't self, right?
No,
It wasn't self. It was like tapping in. So I'm going to say something that might make me very unpopular with IFS people. And I say this with tremendous respect to IFS, and I hold it lightly. I could be wrong, but I will say something that could potentially get me in a lot of trouble. That's it. Can't go to your level 3. I think, maybe this movie might have some ideas and offerings that we don't even have in the model, but that are really special and wonderful and could be helpful to look at more. And this sense of self, I was really trying to figure out, like, is there an equivalent? And I'm like, maybe this is something that this beautiful model of IFS is. Maybe it's something that it doesn't have, and that it would be nice to have that.
I think if we think about our exiles, I want to bring up the Enneagram again, and I don't really mean to, but I think that there's sort of like, if we think about our exiles and like my exiles and what they believe and themes around who I am, that my burdens, so let's say burdens in around who I am, beliefs and feelings, et cetera, around who I am based on, my own history, blah, 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 was super tied to my type. And so depending on what type you are, there's 9 types, you're going to have similar burdens, similar themes in your exiles. And I wonder if that's part of that. Like, this, maybe it's not just parts and self. Maybe there is this other thing around who I am that doesn't really feel like self or parts.
Right. And no, I think you're right. I think that's kind of what I'm saying too. And again, I don't mean to say anything blasphemous against IFS, but it's like, it's not set in stone. It's changing. There's construction going on, but both the sense of self and the islands of personality, both of those constructs, I think there's something there that's really awesome. And I don't know how to put it in my mind, in my development right now with IFS. I don't know how it fits in to IFS. You use the Enneagram, and I'm guessing, but I'm feeling that when you use the Enneagram in your system, it just makes your beautiful sense of IFS that much stronger. And I do that with the MDR, right? Like, I'll have my knowledge of IFS, and then the EMDR just makes it stronger. And it makes everything about IFS true. But it doesn't mean that we can't bring in other things from the outside to then make IFS even that much better. I always say this. I quote Bob Falconer, but in my own way. He talks about the porousness of the mind. And I'm like, that's brilliant and beautiful. Let's talk about the porousness of the model. Is when we're able to open up to other models and other beliefs. I don't think it takes away anything from IFS. If anything, it makes it more inclusive.
It is interesting if we think about parts perspective. Like, let's take it back to these balls, because I think
well, now the balls aren't parts, right? The balls are thoughts.
Yeah, the
memories.
balls, right? The balls are the memories, and then, but what happens, which I think is so cool, I think they do a beautiful job depicting this. Is it's like what memories become exiled, and then what memories become beliefs about us that add to our sense of self. And I think that was brilliant because I think that we all have, I mean, even so many things from just today, right, that happened to you, we talked about, right? But there's so many things just from today that we can't hold on to all of it. And so what are my parts what are my parts throwing in that little machine to make it disappear? And what are my parts putting into sort of, this is who I am. This is my character.
So,
This
see,
is
when
who I
I
am.
really like somebody, I feel comfortable to say, like, I disagree with you. So, Tammy, I really like you. And I totally disagree with that. I feel like, and Tammy and I were laughing that we wanted to make this perhaps like Siskel and Ebert, if you're our age, and thumbs up, thumbs down. I'd love when they would argue, about a movie. But in this part, I disagree. I don't think we could exile memories. Like I think exiling is really done more with parts. You could try to get rid of them or throw them in the memory dump or try to, do things with them. But it feels different. It feels different when there's an actual part that's exiled as opposed to like an orb that's exiled.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. No, that's great. You can disagree. It wouldn't be fun if we just like, yes, we
That's true.
completely agree about this movie. I mean, we're making this up too. So let's just say, I'm like, we also don't know what we're talking about. So there's that too. Okay, so
Disclaimer.
yeah. So, okay, so we talked about the exile. So there's another sort of tenet, this idea that parts, not just memories, but parts that hold the memories, just like parts and their burdens. Memories are different than parts. Burdens are different than parts. I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? Like burdens aren't parts. Memories aren't parts. Parts have
Yes,
memories. Parts
yes,
have
yes. And
burdens.
I would even, if you're going to go there, I might be inclined to say, are some of the memories actually burdens?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
What meaning we make, right? What meaning we make from the memories, meaning we make about the world and ourselves. And
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I
yeah.
think that's where a lot of burdens come from, is the meaning we make out of it.
Oh, totally. What would you say is the difference between a bad memory and a burden?
Well, so let's say a bad memory so let's use Riley. So for Riley, a bad memory is tripping the girl playing hockey. She trips a girl, and that becomes a bad memory because she's like, I'm a bad person. I did something wrong. I am wrong. What did she kept saying? Like, I am wrong, or I am bad, or I'm no good, or she kept saying something like that. So the memory is the tripping, right? The memory has no value to it. It's, I tripped a girl when we were playing hockey. Fact. The burden is, I am bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, what I would have loved is if there was something physical in the movie. If I worked at Pixar, something physical that represented the burden.
So the only thing that I could think about with that, I really did like, and this isn't IFSC, but I was really glad for my son. My son was sitting next to me. I was in between my partner and my son, and he was sitting next to me, and I absolutely loved what happened with when she was in that timeout thing in the hockey, because you saw her use her senses to calm herself down. So
Mhm.
inside there is this sort of thing happening between anxiety and joy and the other part. So there's something happening inside that externally she opened her eyes. She looked down at her ice skates. She started breathing. You could hear the noises coming back. She could hear the click, click, click of the skates and the hockey.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is beautiful, right? She really used her senses to calm herself down. And then her friends, she smiled, her friends smiled, that like co-regulation thing happened. I was like, this is beautiful. So, and of course, my little therapist mom parts afterwards were like, let's talk about that. But I loved that. I mean, that's sort of how she used her body externally to really help her really connect with her present. And as internally things were sort of shifting, then externally something really beautiful happened.
Yeah, they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, I
They
loved
did.
that.
And it was also in that moment, if I'm not mistaken, that it was like all of a sudden her parts were kind of really seeing each other for the first time. Like that was when Joy gave, I think, right when Joy gave anxiety a hug.
Yeah. So what happens, and I'm sure everyone's already seen the movie if they've gotten this far podcast. Well, what happens, right, is like all the emotions get exiled, or the five emotions from the first movie get exiled, literally get kicked out of the control room here. And so they all they come back. So all the emotions are in the room together for the first time, all back in the room. And they've all been through something, right? They've all been through something. And they're all for Riley. I mean, that's what the thing, another tenet of IFS, right? These parts are all
Definitely.
for Riley and love her so much. I mean, I cannot emphasize that enough. It's so clear. So these parts are for us. They're for Riley. It's so beautiful. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe because they've been through so much, there was that moment where there was so much harmony inside of her that was just so beautiful.
And one thing that I found as a therapist doing IFS, and people have told me too, that when you have that harmony inside, you have it outside. And so to take it to another step here, you have what was going on in the body and physically being able to see her relaxing and breathing. You have what's going on inside of the head, which again, IFS, I would say it's could be your entire body, not just your head, but you have with the parts going on inside of the head and they're really seeing each other and reunited. And then you have her reaching out to her friend
Mm-hmm.
and being able to make that connection to her friend that said, Riley, you okay? And again, if you've seen the movie, this is a friend that is not the quote unquote cool one. This is one of her previous friends who sees her having the panic attack and just out of just pure compassion is just like, are you okay? And you're like, Riley, are you going to answer her? Are you not? And so as everything aligns, you see her going back to that connection with her friend.
Yeah, and the I loved that both friends were so talk about sort of like attachment, connection, and like repairing. The friends were so open, and even the teammates that she had been a jerk to, honestly, they were so open and passing her the puck, and like there was such beautiful repair externally. So I love that, right? There was something happening internally where there's sort of all this beautiful harmony inside, and then all this beautiful repair and attachment connection outside.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah.
It was very healing
I was
and
healed.
emotional. I know.
Well, then the music, right? I think it's Michael. I'm gonna get his name wrong. Giamatti. He's the guy that did the music for Lost, the TV show. He did it for Up. That sequence as he's getting older and older. So his music, he just plays one note, and I start crying. So then you
Mm,
have the music coming in with all of the stuff going on, and it's it just really hits.
it's powerful. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. It's so good. So, we only have a few minutes left. We want to talk about self. So there's a question they did. So they did all these tenets of IFS. We think very well. I'm sure we could probably spend another hour on just what worked, and there's so much more here because there's the dream sequence about sort of, or not the dream sequence, but the going to sleep and sort of all the things happening and that sort of imagination station sleepover kind of thing. So that was fascinating.
I love the what was it? The sarcasm.
Yes, the chasm, right? Yes, that was so funny. Yeah, that's so good. So good. But yeah, so the question for us in the IFS world is who is self? Who is self and where is self? And so tell me what you think about that, David. Let's see if we can
Yeah. See,
disagree.
oh, okay. Okay, that would be fun. Well, okay, so if I was a Pixar again, I would love to have some kind of representation of self.
Mhm.
I think that self really in my mind, and I actually I want to disagree, but I feel like you know more about the model than I do. I think you've been I look to you as somebody who really understands it, and I'm still at that newbie slash getting to know it. So I really respect what you have to say on this. In my system, I'm like, wouldn't that be a cool thing to somehow magically have Pixar represent whatever it was, whether it was anamorphic, whether it had eyes and legs and feet and that stuff, or whether it was just like smoke or glitter or whatever, but some kind of representation. I don't feel like I don't feel that sense of self. That was really cool, and the way that they represented that was amazing. I don't think, in my mind, that really hit the mark on what IFS considers self.
Okay, are you talking about the moment? Because I totally forgot about this until you said that. When anxiety's flipping out around the thing and joy, there's like sparkly stardust that goes from joy to anxiety. And that's what actually changes the whole thing. So this beautiful, do you remember
Oh,
that? Like sort of like
now you
glitter.
said that.
I
Yeah, I didn't
forgot about it
remember that
too.
until you just said that.
Yeah, it
That
was.
maybe that was self.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe, okay, so there is this idea that joy is self-like. Joy is not self, um, because she has an agenda, certainly. But she has a huge influence over the team.
But
And
would it be fair to say she's a part, but she has a lot of self energy inside of her?
oh, definitely. But I think they
Yeah.
all do, right? They all have
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
self-energy. I think they all do. But it would be cool. So one way to represent self would be for all the parts to have that glittery stardust to come out of them, right? Like when they're at the command center, so sadness is at the command center, but she's also got some glittery stardust too. I wonder. I'm making that up again, but I think that would be lovely. Right. Because
I
there's
know
nothing
that.
wrong with being sad, right? There's nothing wrong with being disgusted, embarrassed, bored. There's nothing wrong with any of these emotions. And we could have them with a little bit of that self energy stardust at the
See, I
same
want more than
time.
stardust. I need more than stardust for this. I feel like I need something because I tell my clients all the time, don't let your kids drive the wheel of your psychedelic bus. You take the wheel. You could don't kick them out of the bus either. That's not cool. You got to, and you know, because sometimes clients might hear that and say, okay, I'm going to have my inner children. They'll sit in the seat and I'm going to ignore them, right? I'm not going to I'm not going to deal with them, and they're just going to have to shut up. And I'm like, no. Just don't have them drive the bus, and
Mm,
talk to them, get to them. Maybe they got to go to the bathroom. Maybe you got to stop, but maybe they want to
right.
eat, but have them sit there, but just not driving the bus. I think with this movie, it's so beautiful. It's the console. So I would almost say to a
Mm,
client, like, just don't have the parts like at the console. That console is yours. You want to be self-led? Listen to your parts. Let them in the room. Have a party. Order pizza. But you got to be at the console. And the Stardust doesn't do it for me. It's like,
yeah.
yeah, okay, you're Stardust, but unless it's like magically controlling the console, like I need something with hands that could actually be moving the console.
That's good. Okay. I like it. That's a good disagreement. I like that. I like it. So, David, where can people find you? You have a podcast. Tell them what the name of your podcast is. They can find you. And yeah,
All
let's do
right.
that.
Well, I got a challenge for people here. If you go to my podcast, it's called Empowered Through Compassion. I love my guests, just like Tammy has amazing guests, but I have one guest who is really, really cool. So if you could go on to Empowered by Compassion, sorry, Empowered Through Compassion, and find Tammy on it. Tammy's
Aw.
on it, and I had so much fun talking with her. So you can hear more of her.
Yeah, that's great, David. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thank you for
And
having me.
yeah. Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, like, all the things. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or all the places books are available. You can also visit my website, tammysallenberger.com, where you can download a free meditation on getting to know your should parts. You know, there's parts of you who remind you of what you should be doing. They sound a bit critical at times. Yes, we all have them. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and Twitter and the One Inside Facebook page. I'm so grateful for Jack Reardon, who created the new music. Jack is a graduate of Derek Scott's IFS Stepping Stone program. Thanks, Jack, for getting me. And to you, thanks for listening.